Okay, in this episode, we're going to take a quick peek at some basic features of the rack and the sequencer window. First of all, you may notice that this whole window here, you cannot change the width. Unfortunately, it is fixed to the width of the rack. However, if you want to detach the sequencer window on the bottom, the quickest way to do that is to click this little button right here, which says Detach Sequencer. You can also get to that menu by going up to Window and clicking Detach Sequencer Window. So let's go ahead and detach that window. When it detached it, put it on my other screen. So here is a free-floating sequencer window and a free-floating rack window. So I'm going to slide the rack over here just for right now, and the sequencer window is right here. And you can resize this as big or small as you want it. Let's say we want it to just fill the whole entire screen. Now if you want to zoom in on these MIDI regions, you go down here at the bottom and you click this little guy here right on the bottom and you slide this back over this way. So that's like your zoom feature for viewing the entire sequence window for the song. One thing to note, once you have both sequencer and rack windows separated, is at the bottom of each window is its own transport controls. So down here on the bottom of the sequencer window, you'll see some basic transport controls. Starting with this little guy right over here gives you the position of the song cursor, which is measures beats, and then there's time, and then down here is your tempo, and then your time signature. And all of this can be mapped out in the conductor track up at the top. These little buttons here are the rewind, fast forward buttons, and essentially what they do is they just skip ahead or forward or back one measure increment. The stop, also this returns it to the beginning, so if I zoom back out here and I double click the stop button, it takes it back to the top. Play button is also the space bar. So if I hit the space bar, it will pause. If I hit the space bar again, it will play again. So your space bar is essentially like most recording software, play and pause. And then of course the record button once you're ready to start recording on any track. Okay, there's also a loop feature here in the sequencer window, and that's what these two little markers represent up here. So if I wanted to loop, for example, measure 5 through 9, I could set this up and then go back down here and tell it to loop, so that when the cursor up here, now it'll play these 4 bars as a loop. It'll jump back. So there's the loop. So that's essentially a basic feature of the transport window, and you can see if I go over here to the rack, everything is matched down here exactly the way it is in the sequencer window. So for example, right here you have your 2 loop buttons. If I click loop here, it'll turn it off in both places. Another window that I think you'll find very helpful, and we'll say more about later, is the tool window. So you'll have to go to window and select tool window, and that's this little guy right here. The tool window is what you would use to make general changes to any part of the sequence. So let's say I wanted to transpose a song. This is the tool that I would use to transpose an entire track to the key of my choice. I'll say more about that later in another tutorial. To get back out and put the sequencer back with the rack, all I have to do is click this little guy right up here, and it says Attach Sequencer. If I click this, it puts it back with the rack, and you can see it's just like it was when I began. The sequencer window on the bottom and the rack window on the top.